it's Anna LaGrange here from the Mindful Breastfeeding School, and today I'm talking to Liz Stanford. Liz is a hypnotherapist, mindset coach, mum to three, and owner of the Calm Birth School. She trains birth passionate people to become hypnobirthing instructors, each contributing to the change in the negative birth narrative from one generation to the next. Hello, Liz, and thank you for joining me.
Hi, Anna. Thank you for having me. Almost got the giggles then because we talk to each other so often, and then this just felt really formal.
I always say I'm doing my best ever. You know, when you were a kid and you used to kind of pretend you were like a TV presenter.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's your phone
I'm a
voice.
Radio 1 DJ.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you sounded great, and thanks for the intro.
I'm glad it made you giggle. So anyway, tell us a bit more about what it is you do, Liz.
Okay, so as you said, I am the owner of the Calm Birth School, and the Calm Birth School's focus is on creating positive births all around the world and changing, as you said, the negative birth narrative from one generation to the next. So it's really important to me that we fulfill that mission, and the way that we do it is many different ways. We've got an online hypnobirthing course. I have a book coming out next year, which is written with the lovely Susie Ashworth, who is the previous owner of the Calm Birth School. I run training courses all throughout the year, training people to teach hypnobirthing. We have a free community, and then also we're serving people on our social media platforms as well. So yeah, it's really important that people have access to what we have to offer, because I fully believe that hypnobirthing, when applied in a certain way, can be life-changing for people and can really, really make a difference in their birth experience, not in terms of creating a benchmark for a type of birth, or not in terms of creating this perfect birth, but actually helping you navigate through the birth circumstances which you find yourself in.
Yeah, I was just thinking about hypnobirthing, because when I had my first two, you know, no one had ever heard of it. I went to have my third daughter, and she's nearly 9 now, so 9 years ago. It was something that was kind of thought of as a bit alternative, and like I would have loved to have had it, but I was a little bit scared of it. I didn't really know what it was. So, but now it feels like everybody does hypnobirthing. So what do you think has happened in that, you know, that last decade, that where it's become from something, you know, a little bit odd or unusual perhaps, to this, you know, the must do birth preparation course?
Yeah, it really has definitely picked up a lot of momentum over the last decade, and like you, I can relate to when I found hypnobirthing for my first pregnancy. So my daughter's 14 now, so you know, it was a good while ago. Nobody knew what hypnobirthing was, and nobody understood the impacts of it, and actually I kept it like a dirty little secret. You know, I didn't didn't really tell many people that I was doing it. I think my mom knew, my sister knew, and obviously Mike, my husband, knew because he was attending the classes with me. But yeah, I felt a little bit like, what are people going to think, or how am I going to explain this to them? So I just kept it to myself. And then once I'd used it and seen the difference that it had made on me and on my experience, then you know, then I couldn't stop shouting it from the rooftops. So I think perhaps that's many other people have had the similar experience, where they've kind of thought, what is this? But they've taken the plunge, they've done it, they've seen the impact that it has, and then they just start telling different people about it. And it's like, I love that idea that we're all creating a ripple effect in the work that we do, and the work that you do as well, Anna. It's like you can impact, even if you impact one person with hypnobirthing, that person goes on to tell someone else, who then tells someone else, tells someone else, tells someone else. And I just love the idea that we're just rippling across the world. And perhaps that's what's happened. And of course, we've had celebrities that have done hypnobirthing. You know, there's it's been sort of like well kind of communicated in the media that there are certain celebrities who've used this amazing technique to give birth, and that has probably created a lot of interest as well. But I do like to think that it is just people like having like Chinese whispers and creating this little ripple across the world that's really made a huge impact.
All right, well, I think a good next step then would be let's bust some of those myths. So I'll tell you what I thought hypnobirthing was until I knew. So we're talking quite a long while. I thought hypnobirthing was being in a birth pool and being completely silent and just being totally in yourself, and you just could just birth this baby, and you barely even noticed you were doing it. That was what I thought. And I think because I'd had my eldest two sons, and their births had been very positive, but I was let's just say I'm a very noisy birther. Like when I'm giving birth, about it. Like I go all animal instinct, and it just it's incredible. But I think I just thought hypnobirthing isn't for me because I am never going to silently birth a baby. So I had all the myths going on there, didn't I? Like that's all complete rubbish.
Well, I the way that I would kind of explain that is that there's no one way to do it. There's no one way to use hypnobirthing. So, people have used hypnobirthing and have stayed quiet and silent and been in water and the baby has just popped out. Like that does happen. Happen. But it's not something that we're saying is like a guarantee, and it's not the goal. So I think that if, like yourself, like if people think that that's what hypnobirthing is, which it isn't, but that's sometimes what can happen as a consequence of doing hypnobirthing. If they think that that's what it is, they feel that that's really unattainable and unachievable, so they kind of rule it out straight away. So what we're saying at the Calm Birth School is very much like we're not aiming for a particular type of birth, and that's really, really important. Like it's not a water birth, it's it's not a vaginal birth, a cesarean birth. Hypnobirthing doesn't fall into that category. Hypnobirthing is a mindset, it's a set of tools and techniques, it's an approach that you can take to any type of birth experience. And so, you that might mean that you're making a lot of noise. I'm a mooer, I moo a lot, and I'm happy and proud to say that's my birthing style. And I use hypnobirthing for all three of my births. So there's nothing that you can do that cannot make it. I don't even want to use this phrase. I hear people saying things, oh, I had a hypnobirth, and I feel, and that's okay if you want to say that, because some people are very proud that of how they experience birth and they had a hypnobirth. But I think that if we're approaching it that way, if we're making it a type of birth, it just sets some people up for having an experience that they're then disappointed with, because there are so many different variables with birth, and you can experience birth positively in so many different ways. So that's really what we set out to do at the Calm Birth School, is to equip people to deal with whatever happens in their birth experience. And that's not to say that they mundanely go along with whatever's thrown at them, or that they be good girls and do what the medical professionals say. It's really being very active and being very part of the decision-making process during pregnancy and during birth as well, so that you can get to the end of the experience and feel very much like you were part of that experience, and that all contributes to feeling good about your birth.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I work with so many couples who have not had the birth, not had that plan A birth, not having what they planned, but who have done hypnobirthing, and they've said, I'm so glad that I had all those tools, because when I was, whatever it was, whisked off to theatre or whatever, when that wasn't what I'd wanted, I had all the tools to keep myself calm. And like, even people use those sort of tools when they're having an epidural, or even when they're navigating the kind of how they feel afterwards, if their birth has gone different way to how expected to, just that kind of those communication skills with their partner or whoever they're talking to. So I agree, like from what I know about hypnobirthing now, is that it just it enhances every part of the birthing process, however that goes, but also actually beyond that and for the rest of your life and parenting, and it's not just birth, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not just birth, definitely not. And the way I've always approached, not always, but after gaining some experience and understanding about hypnobirthing, I approached it in that way, that it's something you apply to any type of birth experience, and that comes from experience. So I'm not someone who's had 3 plan A birth experiences. The first birth was intervention and was towards the end incredibly challenging, but hypnobirthing helped me with that. My second birth was absolutely I don't use the word easily, but it was perfect. It was exactly what I wanted. And my third birth was a planned home birth that resulted in a transfer to hospital. And for some people that can sound incredibly scary. Yeah. And for some people that's the reason why they won't even consider organising a home birth, is the thought of being transferred. But hypnobirthing helped me in so many different ways for all 3 of those. So you're right, it is a tool that a tool doesn't sum it up enough. That really sort of downplays what it is, but it is something that we can use to affect change in our pregnancy, in our birth experience, and also beyond that in the postnatal period. And goodness me, I still use hypnobirthing daily now, just parenting. I just used it a minute ago, didn't I? Moment, I'm just going to take a few deep breaths and speak to my children before we press record.
Yeah, we talk a lot about at the Mindful Breastfeeding School about calming the nervous system, and that it just is a tool for life, isn't it? And then when we use it, and when we use it in front of our children, then they learn those tools, and then they go on to use them, and yeah, it's all good stuff. Like you were saying about the ripple effect, it's just it's amazing. So when we're talking about using hypnobirthing type skills, what do you sort of see as what do you see as the links between sort of a birth experience and a breastfeeding experience, and how hypnobirthing may help with that? What are your sort of thoughts on that area?
Yeah, so I think it's like you were saying, that there's so much momentum now around hypnobirthing and planning your birth and preparing for your birth. And I just don't think that there's the same approach when it comes to breastfeeding. But with the Mindful Breastfeeding School, you can apply that type of approach to preparing for your breastfeeding experience as well, and have a really similar impact to what you have with hypnobirthing and birth. So I think that they're so similar in that way, that we should be encouraging people to prepare for the breastfeeding period, because it's so difficult, isn't it? It almost feels like birth and breastfeeding are these amazingly instinctive, animalistic experiences, and there's this belief that we should just be able to do it and just rock up or get your boob out and just do it. But because of the way the world is, the way society is, the way that we've been programmed, we're so distant from our own instincts and our own sense of self, that we can no longer do that easily. And so I really believe that hypnobirthing and the Mindful Breastfeeding School brings people back to that sense of self, to who they are, to what their instincts are, and it allows them to have those not perfect experiences, but to have those experiences that they can feel good about, confident about, proud of, and that really helps set the tone for parenting. And it's just it's so important. The two of them just go so beautifully together.
Yeah, I agree. I think often people do separate birth and infant feeding. I think there's a sort of general culture of you need to do lots of preparation for birth. I completely agree with that. It's so important. It makes such a big difference to be empowered and have the information so you can make the choices and have the conversation and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, birth is a day or 2, or for some people it might stretch on for 3 days. But feeding your baby is at least for the first 6 months, however you feed your baby, it's going to be, they don't start eating solid food until 6 months. So it's a really long stretch of time. And yet you're right. We so often just think, it will just all sort of fall into place and just happen. And there's so much, isn't there, in our culture, both with birth and breastfeeding, where a lot of the interventions that we make kind of interfere with that natural instinct that we have, that you were talking about, like whether it is a birth intervention or just not, or with breastfeeding it might be like introducing a formula, or it might even just be like not having skin to skin. It could be all sorts of things, little things that in our culture are quite everyday, but that actually do impact birth or breastfeeding. And that's why with hypnobirthing you sort of teach people to ask the right questions and tune in with their instincts. It's a bit the same with feeding as well, but I think we don't necessarily have the conversations in pregnancy that we do in birth. So I really I'm really passionate about increasing that. And I know that a lot of your instructors have trained with us, and they've added on the feeding conversations onto the birth ones, which I just think is so important. And actually just fourth trimester stuff generally, like that postnatal period generally, because again, it's just, there's not a lot of space in pregnancy to talk about what it's like to have a baby. I think everyone just imagines themselves with them. I just used to imagine myself with my baby sat at a cafe, like reading a magazine, and my friends would just walk like, oh hi, here's my baby, and that's what I thought life would be like. I don't know what I was thinking.
How idyllic. But no, it's not really like that, is it?
It wasn't really like that. No, it was quite messy, and I rarely got dressed. I had to shower about once a week, and I did get out to a cafe, but it was always pretty stressful.
I can relate to that as well. I mean, I've always shared my kind of mental health issues and my issues with anxiety, and I've also had postnatal depression and OCD, intrusive thoughts and things like that. So I knew for me that I needed to do something to help me prepare for birth, and hypnobirthing was something I found from a Google search. But back then, like this is 14 years ago, more than 14 years ago, when I was pregnant with my daughter, there wasn't anything like what you're offering now with the mindful breastfeeding school that could help me prepare for breastfeeding. And so I got the birth bit kind of sorted, and then after that it was literally like, to me it was like, what do I do? I don't get this bit, the feeding bit. I don't understand it. The only reference I had, and I do think it's so important that we have these kind of references of breastfeeding or feeding, however we want to feed, that we get an understanding of what's involved and what it looks like. The only breastfeeding example I had was my sister, who had just given birth 9 months before I had, and she was breastfeeding. She breastfed for 6 months exclusively, I think, and she she was like, it was just so natural to her. It was just so normal and beautiful. And she sat there for hours feeding my nephew. He just loved being close to her, really, and she loved it as well. So I saw that and thought, oh right, that's like, that looks pretty easy. And it looked very normal. But then when it came for me to do it, because I'm not the same as my sister, she's very relaxed and laid back and chilled in some ways, and I'm like very much like, oh my gosh, I need to know exactly what to do, and if it doesn't go to plan, what do I do, and how do I navigate those feelings. I do have a chilled side to me as well, but with things like that, it's very much, how do I work through this? And I didn't have that. I didn't have those tools. So I think you're right, like we need to be having these conversations. We need to be bringing it into people's awareness that it's easy for some people and it's not easy for everyone, and the best thing to do, you don't know if it's going to be easy or not, so the best thing to do is inform yourself and be as prepared as possible in that way.
And I think the really nice thing about, and you do get it in birth as well, but the other nice thing about breastfeeding is there is the support out there. It's just you have to sort of recognize that support is needed often, and not to wait, because I think often we think, oh yeah, well, let's just keep going. Or for example, someone will have painful nipples and then someone will say, well, it's supposed to hurt to start with, and they'll be like, oh okay, then they won't get the help they need. So I think there is the help out there as well, but you're right, the actual preparation is makes such a big difference. And interestingly, a lot of people come to me with their second babies because, you know, they haven't had the experience they hoped for the first time, and they want to prepare differently. And I love all that. And I think it goes, and I always recommend hypnobirthing to them as well, because I just think the two things go so beautifully hand in hand.
Yeah, and you know, I feel that way as well. And you mentioned earlier that a lot of my instructors have done your training, and absolutely, because I'm always kind of like talking about the benefits of what you do. And when I do my training sessions and we touch on breastfeeding, we talk about that, I always say, like, breastfeeding or feeding is just a separate antenatal course. Like, you need to create space and time to have those conversations. It can't just be like a quick bolt on to the end of a hypnobirthing course. There needs to be time to kind of approach it in the same way that you approach birth with hypnobirthing. And that's what the Mindful Breastfeeding School really does and really provides. And you know, you've got so many practitioners now out there doing this, which is like really exciting and wonderful to think that the same ripple effect that I feel with hypnobirthing is now happening with, you know, the Mindful Breastfeeding School. And
it is, it's amazing. And what I'm really looking forward to seeing over the next decade, in a similar way to what's happening with hypnobirthing, is the same that with infant feeding, new parents, expectant parents start to see that it is important. They need it as much as, you know, that it is not just a decision, oh, I'm going to breastfeed my baby, or I'm going to bottle feed my baby. That however you choose to feed your baby, it's really valuable. It makes a big difference to put that preparation time in and have those conversations and work out, you know, exactly, you know, what, not exactly, but get an idea of what your belief, you know, what it is you want, and getting the support and you know, everything in place ready for when your baby arrives. So
definitely, I think there's a real important, what you just touched on there is really important, having that flexibility throughout birth prep and throughout your birth experience can be applied to breastfeeding as well. Like, it doesn't have to be one way for it to be positive or for it to be a good experience, and the right type of preparation allows you to build in that flexibility. And so that's really important with hypnobirthing. I get a lot of people saying, you know, oh, I know someone who did hypnobirthing and it didn't go to plan, and you know, that when it didn't go to plan, they didn't know what to do. And you know, that's because they've been shown to approach it without that flexibility, and then that's impacted how they feel afterwards. So always kind of allowing that is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that we always say we meet families where they're at. Where are you at? What do you want? What do you envisage? And here's some tools that I can support you with that.
Yeah, brilliant.
So Liz, I would just like to ask you, what if people want to work with you, if they want to come and train with you, or perhaps they're a parent who wants to know a bit more hypnobirthing, where do we find you?
So you can visit my website, which is www.thecalmbirthschool.com, or you can head over to Instagram, where the handle is The Calm Birth School, or you can search up our free group, which is the Calm Birth School Community on Facebook. And yeah, you'll find me on any of those, and I'm always happy to have a chat, whether it's about training or whether it's about, you know, hypnobirthing in general for pregnancy, for, you know, birth prep, then that's fine.
Thank you. So yeah, all the links are going to be in the podcast notes. So thank you very much for joining me. I've really enjoyed chatting to you about all of that, and I could talk to you all day, quite frankly. But thank you, Liz, for coming on.
That's okay. I've loved it too, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your spending your time here. If you'd like to know more, a good place to start would be with the Mindful Breastfeeding book. It's available from Amazon around the world, and it's a short interactive guide to mindful breastfeeding with journaling and guided relaxations and just more talk on the importance of having a calm and connected infant feeding experience. You can find our website at www.mindfulbreastfeedingschool.com. The link is below, and on there you'll get access to our practitioners directory. So if you are a parent and you'd like to work with somebody who's trained in mindful breastfeeding skills, as well as all the practical skills as well, to be able to help you on your infant feeding journey, then you will find someone you can work with there. They also run classes as well as one-to-one sessions, so go and have a look around. And you can find access to our courses. So if you are somebody who would like to add mindful breastfeeding to your practice, then please do come and find our courses. We've got free training on there for professionals and birth workers, as well as access to be able to talk to me. So do leave me messages, do get in touch on social media. All the links are below. I look forward to hearing from you.